From WQAD News 8, my name is Joe McCoy, and you are listening to Sports with the Real McCoy. We are now 53 days away from the first NFL Sunday of the 2023 season, and I am starting to get that itch again. I always am craved for some football, but every single year, it is cyclical for me. When July rolls around, right around the time that the MLB is having their All-Star break, just that crave for football comes back. It's kind of because we have that lull period. You have the NFL draft where everyone is so, everyone's doing all of the research into the players. You're getting excited about the players that your team is drafting. And then you have a little bit more free agency, but you really kind of have this lull period where not a lot is going on, not a lot of moves are being made. But when it gets to mid-July, I just have such a rush to start watching football again, to start talking about it with my friends all the time. And the fact that we're only 53 days away from the first NFL Sunday, week 1, is extremely exciting. We have training camp starting in just under 10 days. So once that happens, it really starts getting ramped up in terms of media coverage. There's new information coming out at training camp every single day about how players are looking. And then, of course, we have preseason games where we get to see those vets play for a little bit. We get to see the young guys, their first time in action. So it is the greatest time, so much anticipation for the start of the season. And I really cannot wait for all of it to begin. But on this episode of Sports with the Real McCoy, what I really want to talk about is just a preview for the Chicago Bears and the 2023 season. I think there is so much optimism for the Bears this year. A lot of Bears fans are extremely excited based off of what Justin Fields showed last year, the moves that we made in the offseason, and rightfully so. We should be excited as a fan base. Are we maybe overly excited? Possibly, but maybe we're underexcited. Maybe the Bears will be even better than some of us optimistic fans like myself are anticipating. But I wanted to break down things from last season, things that I feel like the Bears can build upon, and why I think some of the additions they made this offseason could really propel them to be not only a playoff team this year, but a potential Super Bowl contender in the coming years ahead. So I want to start on offense, the most important side of the ball, in my opinion. Of course, we're going to start with Justin Fields, the Bears' hopefully franchise quarterback, hopefully our first ever superstar quarterback that wears that orange and navy. But Fields last year, when you look at his stats, his stats are not gaudy at all. They're actually quite unimpressive if you're taking them just for face value. He had 2,242 passing yards, 17 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions in his 15 games played. Of course, he did something that almost no quarterback has ever done. He rushed for 1,143 yards last year, which was absolutely ridiculous. It felt like ever since that Monday Night Football game against the Patriots, when they started really designing the offense for him, calling more design runs, letting him use his 4.4 speed, ever since they did that, it felt like every game he was going for some highlight reel type of run. Of course, we had the one versus Miami, the one versus Green Bay. There was a couple against Detroit. The list just goes on in terms of incredible highlight reel plays that he had using his legs. But from the air, yes, his numbers were not that great, but he also did not have a lot of weapons to work with. Darnell Mooney for basically the entire season was our wide receiver 1, and no disrespect to Darnell Mooney, I absolutely love him as a player. I think he's going to be incredible this year, having DJ Moore and Chase Claypool alongside him, but Darnell Mooney is not a bona fide wide receiver 1. And then we trade for Chase Claypool in the middle of the year, right before the trade deadline. Claypool comes in, he's trying to learn the offense. He also gets banged up with a knee injury, just never really got his footing. So for a lot of the year, we're running Darnell Mooney, Equanimeous St. Brown, Dante Pettis. Those are our 3 main receivers, and that is not an NFL caliber receiving core. Also, our offensive line struggled last year. Yes, I will be the first to admit that some of the sack totals were because of Justin Fields, and Justin Fields has admitted that as well. He needs to get the ball out of his hands sooner. He needs to be more decisive on his decision making. Fields also had the tendency to not really run into some sacks, but were opportunities where he had the chance to just throw the ball away, where he's trying to be evasive. He ends up getting sacked. those are instances that led the sack total to be higher than it should have. So no doubt some of the sacks that Fields took were on him. And like I said, he would be the first to admit that. But that is not to be said that our offensive line was very underwhelming last year. A lot of guys were injured. There was a lot of rotation going on. We had Sam Mustipher playing at center, who, thank God, Sam Mustipher is no longer the Chicago Bears center. I wish him the best in Baltimore, but I think all fans are going to say good riddance along with me. But we had Larry Borom at right tackle. Then we had Riley Reiff. We had Braxton Jones, a rookie, playing left tackle, which I think Braxton Jones really could be a cornerstone for this offensive line. But still, having a rookie playing left tackle all 17 games, a fifth-round rookie for that matter, is not necessarily the most ideal situation. So it was just a lot of moving pieces on that offensive line. Fields never really got the proper protection that he needed. And even then, when he did get the proper protection, a lot of times we didn't have the receivers to create that separation. So when you take a look, though, at our key offensive additions in the offseason, and there are plenty of them, Ryan Poles was in his bag this offseason, getting players around Justin Fields that can help him prove or take that step to prove that he is our franchise quarterback. So, like I said, we added Chase Claypool at the deadline, and I know Chase Claypool is one of the most polarizing figures in all of Chicago sports right now. So, when you look at Chase Claypool's stats, his rookie year, he came into the league, second-round pick out of Notre Dame, lit up the NFL. 873 yards, 9 touchdowns as a rookie. This guy his nickname was Mapletron, a play on words from Megatron, Kelvin Johnson, Mapletron, because he's from Canada. But it looks like this guy was the next superstar wide receiver. He's huge. He's 6'4", 220. He's fast. He's great after the catch. This is going to be the next star. The Pittsburgh Steelers have just hit a home run out of the park. Second year, he has another good year, 860 yards, does have a dip in touchdowns, though, only has 2 touchdowns on the year, but still being very productive in terms of yardage. Third year, he only plays 8 games, 311 yards, only 1 touchdown, and then last year he gets traded. So in 7 games total that he played in a mix of Pittsburgh and Chicago, he really was not that productive. He only had 140 yards with the Bears last year in the few games that he played for us. So it certainly looks like right now that Chase Claypool is on the decline. And a lot of fans are upset that Ryan Poles ended up trading what ended up being the 32nd overall pick in the NFL draft for Chase Claypool. Here's the thing, though. I think Chase Claypool is the key to potentially unlocking this offense and being a top 10 offense. Because if Chase Claypool gets back to where he was as a rookie, and can put up 800 receiving yards and get you 6, 7, 8 touchdowns, that trade was a home run for Ryan Poles. Because most receivers, let's just be real, the NFL draft is so hit or miss, no matter where a guy gets taken. N'Keal Harry got taken 32nd overall. He's been a total bust. T. Higgins got taken 33rd overall. He's been a superstar. You never know what you're going to get at that position. Or not even at that position, but in the draft as a whole. So if Chase Claypool can come out here and ball like he did, and like we've seen him ball, and be a deep threat, be that jump ball receiver that Justin Fields desperately needs, this Bears offense is going to click. And the reason I say that is because we know what the other 2 guys are. We know DJ Moore is a star. DJ Moore, year 1, comes into the league, 788 yards, 2 touchdowns. The next 3 years of his career with horrible quarterback play. I will list off the 7 quarterbacks that DJ Moore has played with in his career. But his next 3 seasons, 1,100 yards or more each season with 4 touchdowns in each year. Yes, his touchdown totals are lower than you would like, but having 3 years in a row where you're over 1,100 yards, that is dominance from the receiver position. Last year, 888 yards, 7 touchdowns. So in his first 5 seasons, DJ Moore has just over 5,200 yards, and he has 20 touchdowns, or 21 touchdowns, I believe. DJ Moore is a bona fide wide receiver 1. You could argue he's on the fringe of being a top 10 receiver in the league. Depending on where you put him on your list, he's certainly top 15. PFF had him ranked 13 overall in the top receivers in the NFL. But the 7 quarterbacks that DJ Moore has played with are Cam Newton, Kyle Allen, Taylor Heineke, Will Grier, who I don't even know who Will Grier is, Teddy Bridgewater, PJ Walker, and Sam Darnold. It's a horrible list. It is a list of Cam Newton, but when he was not in his prime anymore, a bunch of backups, Sam Darnold, who was a bust, and PJ Walker, who is now the backup for Justin Fields. DJ Moore has never been with a true star quarterback, because I can't count Cam Newton in that, because Cam Newton was not a star when DJ Moore got there. He now has Justin Fields, a potential star quarterback. We haven't seen it yet, but Justin Fields has the possibility to not only turn DJ Moore into a star, but DJ Moore has the possibility to turn Justin Fields into a star. So we know we're going to get the production from him. And then you have Darnell Mooney, everyone a fan favorite. In his second year in the league, Darnell Mooney had 1,055 yards and 4 touchdowns. Last year, he got injured later on in the season, wasn't able to be as productive. But his second year, Justin Fields' rookie year, still under Matt Nagy, a horrible offensive play caller. Darnell Mooney balled out like a true wide receiver 2. A wide receiver 2 that's that fringe wide receiver 1 that really could carry you for a game. You know, maybe DJ Moore's having an off day. Maybe DJ Moore's hurt. Well, you know Darnell Mooney can step in there and be that guy for the day. So we know Darnell Mooney's going to ball. He's coming off of the injury, lower extremity injury. It's going to have to be wait and see how well he can bounce back. But everything we've seen from training camp videos, from him working out with Justin Fields, it looks like Darnell Mooney is 100% good to go. And side note, Darnell Mooney looks like a monster in terms of the size he has put on. If you haven't seen photos of Darnell Mooney, how he's bulked up, I'll throw a photo on the screen right now. He's huge. He looks like a linebacker out there. So no more skinny Darnell Mooney, getting knocked around by cornerbacks or anything like that. This guy has gotten physical, he's gotten big, and as long as he can keep that speed and that nimbleness and agility, Darnell Mooney is trying to be a household name this year. So those are your 3 main receivers. They still have Equanimeous St. Brown. They signed him to a 1-year extension. They still have Velus Jones, who I think Velus Jones can carve out a nice niche for him on this team. I really do. He just has to fix the fumbling issues, get a bit more consistent with his hands. But I think Velus Jones can develop into being a solid gadget guy. The guy who's your punt and kick returner. He's a solid gadget guy. He's fast. He can run the deep ball. He can, take a screen 20, 30 yards. Velus Jones will carve out a niche for him. He's been putting in the work this offseason. He's just got to produce this year. The Bears also drafted Tyler Scott, the rookie out of Cincinnati, another deep threat receiver, kind of like Darnell Mooney was coming out of college. Obviously, it's yet to be seen what Tyler Scott can be, if it can be anything. But if Tyler Scott can be anything like Darnell Mooney, you're looking at a wide receiver 4 that's producing, and that's crucial for an offensive success. So Justin Fields has the weapons around him. We know DJ Moore is going to ball. We know Darnell Mooney is going to be solid. But like I said, if Chase Claypool gets back to how he was his rookie year, this offense is going to be explosive. And I love how Ryan Poles has built this receiving core, because each receiver does specific things. DJ Moore is your all-around receiver. He does everything well. He runs routes well, a terrific hands catcher. He'll go over the middle. He really just opens up the entire offense. DJ Moore, he's a true wide receiver 1 for a reason. He does it all. But then you got Chase Claypool. Also a little bit can do it all, but really is your big body receiver. He's going to go up and get you those jump balls. He's going to be your big red zone target. He's going to be able to go deep. You throw it at 40 yards, let your guy go make a play. That's really what Chase Claypool is good at, but he also has shown the ability to go across the middle. He's a decent route runner. He can take a screen and with that big body, break some tackles, get you that first down. And then you have Darnell Mooney. He's really the guy that opens up the offense. He's going to be the Bears slot receiver, which is where he excels at. The Bears had him playing a lot of outside since he was their wide receiver 1. But now that he's their wide receiver 2, they're going to be able to play him in the slot. He's going to be able to work those nickel cornerbacks. If he gets a matchup against a linebacker, that linebacker is toast. So Darnell Mooney is now truly in the best position he's been in his whole career, and so is Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool has no pressure to be a wide receiver 1 this year. He knows he's not the wide receiver 1. He's fighting to be the wide receiver 2. But he's going to go out there, he's going to get favorable matchups, and he's going to have every single opportunity week in and week out to prove that he was worth trading the 32nd overall pick for. And when we get into the rest of the offense, I want to go into the running game a little bit, which I really like the running back room that Ryan Poles has assembled this year. But we got Khalil Herbert, who last year had 731 yards and 4 touchdowns, and that was only in 13 games. So he missed out 4 games due to injury. And that, of course, was him also being kind of the backup to David Montgomery. So right now, Khalil Herbert would be our running back 1. But then the Bears brought in D'Onta Foreman on a very favorable deal. 1 year, $3 million, tremendous price for D'Onta Foreman. But last year, D'Onta Foreman had 914 yards, 5 touchdowns. And this is for a Carolina team who had the best running back in all of football, Christian McCaffrey, there for half of the season until they traded him to San Francisco. But when Christian McCaffrey got traded and everyone thought, this Carolina offense, they just traded their best player away, they're going to start sucking, D'Onta Foreman came right in and said, hold your horses, I can be the bell cow back in Carolina, and he proved himself. And the fact that he now is in Chicago for only $3 million, I think that was a steal by Ryan Poles. And I think one thing that D'Onta Foreman adds that Khalil Herbert isn't is he really can be that goal line back. I think D'Onta Foreman probably is going to get a lot of touches near the goal line just because he's physical. No one is Derrick Henry, but he really does remind you a little bit of Derrick Henry, where he could be stuffed at the line and he could just push himself forward, bully his way into the end zone. And that's something that the Bears running back room is lacking. And then in the 4th round, Ryan Poles went out and drafted Roschon Johnson, who I think, this is one of my hot takes for the year, but I think Roschon Johnson is going to be the Bears running back 1 by the end of the season. He's a really good pass catcher out of the backfield. He's big, he's physical, 220, used to be a quarterback, and now he's a running back, but he still has that brain of a quarterback. He processes the game like a quarterback. He understands blitz packages like a quarterback. And because of that, Roschon Johnson was the best pass blocking running back in all of collegiate football. You can talk to analysts, you can look at the statistics. He was the best pass blocking running back. And that is huge in the NFL, especially when you have a guy like Justin Fields who likes to scramble a lot. He's a younger guy. Roschon Johnson can kind of be that guy when you have a good pass blocking running back who kind of saves the offensive line. The guard misses a block, the center misses a block, but you have Roschon Johnson there to clean it up, pick up that block, give Justin Fields another second or two to complete the play. So I think Roschon Johnson is going to be the Bears' RB1 by the end of the year. I think it's because he doesn't have a lot of miles on him because he was backing up Bijan, and I think he's a guy that can absolutely do it all, and he's going to show that to Bears fans throughout the season. And then when you look at the tight end position, I think there's room for depth here for sure, but I think we're pretty solid. We got Cole Kmet, who really had his breakout year last year. 2 years ago, Cole Kmet had a career high 612 receiving yards, but he had no touchdowns. The man could not find the end zone. And last year that was reversed. He had 544 yards, but he had 7 touchdowns. And he also had 10 less receptions last year. So if you added 10 more receptions, he would probably be above that 600 receiving yard mark. And 600 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns is extremely, extremely solid for a tight end. So Cole Kmet, no doubt the tight end 1. We hope that he can take that next step forward again. And I think the reason we saw such an increase in touchdown production was because of the scheme that Luke Getsy was running. We've seen Luke Getsy's scheme be favorable for tight ends. He really does a great job of drawing up plays for tight ends, especially in the red zone, getting them open. And you saw most of Cole Kmet's touchdowns last season were schematically drawn up. They were beautifully designed plays, got him open, some misdirection. He leaks out of the backfield. You see Cole Kmet, he's wide open, touchdown Bears. So I think Luke Getsy will continue to develop plays for Cole Kmet, and you hopefully should just see that production increase even more. And again, one of my favorite offseason signings, besides a cheapie deal like D'Onta Foreman, was the Bears signing former Packers tight end Robert Tonyan. Tonyan grew up a Bears fan, diehard Bears fan. There's pictures of him having Brian Urlacher jerseys on. But in 2020, Tonyan had this breakout year. He had 586 yards, 11 touchdowns. Of course, he had one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, Aaron Rodgers, throwing him the ball. I know it pains me to say that. I know it probably pains Bears fans to hear that, but I think we all can admit that Aaron Rodgers is one of the GOATs of the quarterback position. But Tonyan has this breakout year. He's looking like potentially a star. I know he won a lot of fantasy leagues that year, but in 2021, he only plays 8 games. He ends up tearing his ACL against the Arizona Cardinals. It's a really tough scene for a guy just has his breakout year. He's looking to get a payday, ends up tearing his ACL, but the Packers re-signed him on a 1-year deal, and he kind of bounced back. He had 470 yards, only saw the end zone twice, but Robert Tonyan being the Bears tight end 2 is going to be so important for this offense because Tonyan is a better pass catcher than Cole Kmet is. And Cole Kmet is a very solid pass catcher. But Tonyan is arguably a better route runner, and he's just a pure hands catcher. And if Tonyan can give the Bears 400 or 500 yards, 4 or 5 touchdowns, that's amazing production from your tight end too. And I think it'll really help unlock Cole Kmet because the Bears will be able to run more dynamic 2 tight end sets now. The thing is, last year we had fine tight ends. We had Trayvon Wesco, but he really was only a blocking tight end. But Cole Kmet was really our only pass-catching option from the tight end position. Now you bring in Robert Tonyan, a guy who knows Luke Getsy's system because he played under him for the vast remaining years of his career. So he comes into the system, one he's familiar with. He's going to be able to help Cole Kmet even learn the system even better, learn a few nuances of it. And I think he's just going to help open up that passing game a little bit more. Luke Getsy likes to run two tight end sets, and now they're going to actually be able to run it with 2 guys who are very dynamic pass catchers, and Tonyan just gives the Bears another very viable wide receiver option. And now I want to get to the more downside of the team that's the part of the team that still is certainly lacking, and that is the defensive side of the ball. Ryan Poles went out, made some very key free agent additions, signed 2 big-time linebackers, Tremaine Edmunds from the Buffalo Bills and TJ Edwards from the Philadelphia Eagles. So the Bears linebacking core is completely set. Jack Sanborn, who was an undrafted rookie last year, who quickly turned into a fan favorite, showed that he should absolutely be a starter in this league. But Jack Sanborn is now our linebacker 3, which having that type of depth at the linebacker position is kind of unheard of. And we also drafted Noah Sewell in the 5th round of the NFL draft. For those of you who don't know, before last year, Sewell was highly regarded as a first-round pick. Most people had him as the best linebacker in all of college football. He kind of has a down year, ends up falling to the Bears in the 5th round, and now he's the Bears linebacker 4. So we'll see what Sewell develops into. I think at the very least, he'll be a really solid special teamer for the Bears. The guy's got great closing speed. He's a thumper when he hits you. Those are the type of guys you really like to have on special teams. But Ryan Poles completely went out there, retooled the linebacking room. Matt Eberflus now has the linebacking core that he needs to run his defense. And I think the linebacking core is going to be super solid for the next 4 years. Having Tremaine Edmunds, TJ Edwards, Jack Sanborn, the linebacking core is set. There's no doubts about it. The Bears also went out and I think really helped their secondary. They ended up trading up to draft Tyrique Stevenson, the cornerback out of Miami, in the 2nd round of this year's NFL draft. And Tyrique Stevenson, my guess, is going to start day 1 opposite of Jalen Johnson. You now have a cornerback room that is Jalen Johnson, Tyrique Stevenson, and Kyler Gordon, and I think that's a very formidable cornerback room. We hope that Kyler Gordon can take that next step, but the good thing for Gordon is that now he's going to only be a slot corner, and then I think is really where he belongs. I think he has the chance to develop into a really solid nickel corner in the NFL. He just has to keep working. But he showed flashes last year. He showed the ability to take the ball away, had that interception against the Patriots, had an interception against the Eagles. Kyler Gordon showed flashes last year. He did get burned a lot. I'll be the first to admit it. He certainly was a weak link in that secondary for a lot of the year. But he also showed flashes, and I think if he just keeps developing, cornerback is one of the toughest positions in the NFL to come in and be good right away. So hopefully year 2 will do wonders for him. But, Tyrique Stevenson, a lot of people loved that pick. A lot of NFL pundits were saying how Tyrique Stevenson was one of their favorite picks in that 2nd round, felt like it was a guy who could have been drafted even higher. The Bears obviously thought highly of him because they traded up to get him. But now you have a really solid 3 cornerbacks that are going to be your starting corners. And I think also where the Bears got better at cornerback is getting depth, because the Bears really lacked cornerback depth last year, especially once Jalen Johnson got hurt. I mean, we were starting undrafted rookie after undrafted rookie, and it was not a good situation out there. But we still have Kindle Vildor. I know a lot of fans don't like him, but I think Kindle Vildor as your cornerback 4, that's fine. He's a fine player. He can come in. He can start when he needs to. You can put him in specific packages. I'm fine having Kindle Vildor as your cornerback 4. And we also saw depth develop with one of our undrafted rookies last year, Justin Jones. Justin Jones came in and really surprised me. A lot of fans might not have taken notice, but I think Justin Jones proved that he at least deserves a chance to make this roster again, and I think Justin Jones will make this roster again. Again, we'll have to see the type of work that he put in this offseason, how he comes looking at training camp and preseason, but Justin Jones, I think, showed that he's not going to get embarrassed on the NFL field, and he could very well be a very solid cornerback depth piece for the Bears. The Bears also drafted cornerback out of Minnesota in the 6th round of the NFL draft. We'll see if that develops into anything, but the cornerback depth is much more solid than it was last year, something that I think will help out this defense a lot, especially because corners go down. There's a lot of injuries at the cornerback position, a lot of hamstring injuries, soft tissue, things along that line. So having good depth at the cornerback position will be crucial for this Bears defense to at least staying decent. That's really all we're hoping for this year. And on the back end, you got, the back end is set in terms of safety position. You got Eddie Jackson, you got Jaquan Brisker, who I think is a budding star in this league. Jaquan Brisker, I was at the first preseason game when we played the Kansas City Chiefs, and the second I saw Jaquan Brisker step on that field, I said, that is an NFL safety. The way he moves, the way he carries himself, the way he hits. Jaquan Brisker, in my opinion, is going to be a star in this league. I think him and Eddie Jackson, for the couple of years that they're going to continue playing together before Eddie Jackson either retires or the Bears move on from him, I think it's going to be a couple of really exciting years at that safety position. But we have to get to the bleakness of this defense, and unfortunately, Bears fans, it is quite bleak, and that is the defensive line. The Bears' defensive line last year was atrocious. It was the worst in the league. That's not an exaggeration. They were the worst defensive line in the league. I think probably the biggest stat that says that is that the Bears last year had 20 sacks total as an entire team, which is a horrible number. And the leader on the Bears in terms of sacks was Jaquan Brisker, our rookie safety, who led the team with 4. The fact that we had a safety, let alone a rookie safety, who led our defense in sacks is awful. The next 2 leaders in sacks were Justin Jones with 3 and Trevis Gipson with 3. But this defensive line could not get at the quarterback to save their life, and it made life a living hell for our secondary, because having a young secondary is already hard enough. Having a young secondary when your defensive line is getting no pressure is almost impossible for those guys. So I do like a few things that Ryan Poles did this offseason. Him and Eberflus, one thing, this is a little side note, one thing I love about Poles and Eberflus is how transparent they are. And they have said since the beginning how important it is to have a rotation of guys on that defensive line. And that is something that they went out and developed this offseason. A few of basically the key additions that we made for the defensive line. We went out and signed DeMarcus Walker from Tennessee, 3-year, $21 million deal. We signed Rasheem Green from Seattle. We signed Andrew Billings from the Raiders. And then we drafted Gervon Dexter and Zach Pickens. So 2 of our first 4 draft picks this year were defensive tackles. They made it obvious that they are going to try to beef up this defensive line, especially at least in the run game, because the Bears had the league worst rushing defense last year. They allowed 4.9 yards per carry, which is just an abysmal number. So they go out and sign DeMarcus Walker, who's kind of a career backup in Tennessee, but a guy who is a really solid backup. I think for the Bears, unfortunately, he's going to be one of our starters. Maybe this propels him to take that next step in his career, but DeMarcus Walker is a very solid player. I read some comments from Tennessee Titans fans saying that DeMarcus Walker is the type of player you want on your team. He will give you 100% effort, 100% of the time. He's always ready to come in and make a spark, make a big play. And those are the type of guys that Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles really look for. They look for guys for high effort, high motor, guys that are bringing that juice. And that's what, from what I've seen on tape and from what Tennessee Titans fans have said, that is what DeMarcus Walker brings. So I really liked that signing. We signed Rasheem Green, another career backup. Don't really know what to expect from him. Potentially a guy who could maybe get you 4 sacks as a rotational guy. I don't know, but not a lot of promise there. And the Rasheem Green signing kind of was a signing based off of measurables. We'll see if maybe with proper coaching he can maybe develop into a decent rotational guy. And then we signed Andrew Billings, who I think is an under-the-radar signing that I think will actually be really good for us. Andrew Billings is one of those players that's just a mammoth of a man. He's huge, over 330 pounds, I believe. Just really a space eater defensive tackle. But not only a guy who just sits there and eats up blocks. Andrew Billings has some power to him. He has the ability to push the pocket, really get some pressure on that quarterback, and really be a good, solid run stuffer in the middle of that defense. So I really like the Andrew Billings signing. The Bears did not have someone on the defensive line last year that could really suck up those blocks, take on double teams, please just stop the bleeding on the run game. And I think Andrew Billings will help with that. And then the two rookies, Gervon Dexter and Zacch Pickens. Hopefully they can develop into some sort of Akeem Hicks, Eddie Goldman type of duo. Gervon Dexter is a really interesting player because he kind of shows some pass rush ability, but he really is a big run stuffer. He lacked get off in college, but I think that's something that can be coached. And then Zacch Pickens also is kind of that same type of player. He does struggle in the run game a little bit, but is able to get after the quarterback in that middle of the defense. And I think both guys really will bring a lot of juice to this defensive line. Of course, it's a lot to ask two rookies to be large contributors right off the bat, but that's what the Bears are going to need. The Bears are going to need Gervon Dexter and Zacch Pickens to step up right away. If they're not starters, at least be in the rotation constantly, and hopefully be able to produce. So we'll see. It's the rookies. You never know what you're going to get with rookies. They might look great on film, they might look great on paper. They could turn out to be superstars, or they could turn out to be complete bust. We will not know until they step on that field. But clearly, Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles have made it a priority to shore up that defensive line, especially the interior of that defensive line with the defensive tackles. The Bears still have Travis Gibson, Dominique Robinson, our fifth-round draft pick from last year. We still have Justin Jones, who I think fans were really underrating last year. I think Justin Jones was really solid for this Bears defensive line. But again, he was asked to be the star three-tech defensive tackle, and he's just not that. He's a solid rotational defensive tackle who played well for the Bears, but Justin Jones cannot be the best defensive lineman on your team. And that's what gets me to the last point that I want to make, which is where I want the places I want to see Ryan Poles still address in free agency. The Bears still have the most amount of cap space in the entire NFL. They still have $32 million. This team is anything but solidified. And of course, there are going to be players that are released from teams. There always is a wave of players, good, solid NFL players that are released from teams before week one begins. And the Bears also have first priority on the waiver wires because we were the worst team in the league last year. So we saw Ryan Poles hit the waiver wire heavy last year. Biggest signing was Alex Leatherwood, but Trayvon Wesco was another one, the tight end that I talked about. So Ryan Poles is not afraid to pick up players from the waiver wire. So I do believe there will be some players that are released that the Bears will sign. But I think they need to make another free agent signing, a guy that's still out there. And the three names that I want to bring up to you guys are Jadeveon Clowney, Justin Houston, and Yannick Ngakoue. All three of them are defensive ends, all three of them very different players. When you look at Jadeveon Clowney, and he's who I want to start with first because I think he's the most polarizing out of all three of them. But he's 30 years old, former first overall pick of the Houston Texans, came into the league, looked like he was going to be the next superstar defensive end, and has never really developed into that. Jadeveon Clowney has never had a 10 or more sack season. The most he's ever had is 9.5 sacks in 2017. He's really just been very inconsistent. Some years you get 9 sacks from him. He has 3 years where he has 9 or more sacks. And some years he kind of falls off the face of the planet. You get 3 sacks from him. Last year in 12 games he had 2 sacks. There's some years where he has no sacks. But where Jadeveon Clowney makes his money is in the run game. Jadeveon Clowney is a really good edge setter. He's a really good run-stopping defensive end. And that's something that the Bears need. Now the Bears also need pass rush. But I do think Jadeveon Clowney, out of the 3 guys that I just mentioned, is the best mix of both. But the issue is that he has injury concerns. He only one time in his career has played an entire season. He did have some years where he played 13 games, 15 games, 14 games, but he has injury issues. Last year, he only played 12 games. His rookie year, he only played 4. In 2020 with Tennessee, he only played 8 games. So, you don't want to send big money out to a guy who potentially isn't going to be on the field, because the best ability is availability. And Jadeveon Clowney has shown that he does get nicked up quite often. It's just the nature of the beast. But I do think that he would be worth signing for the Bears. And the price has to be right. I'm not saying go out and shell a bunch of money for Jadeveon Clowney. I'm not exactly sure what his market would be, what his price tag would end up being, or even if it would be a 1-year deal, maybe it's a 2-year deal. But I think he would at least give the Bears a player that teams have to be just a little bit scared of. A player you kind of have to game plan for. And depending on the Jadeveon Clowney you get, you might end up getting a guy that turns into a really good pass rusher for you that year. In 2021, he had 9 sacks. Granted, he was across the line from Myles Garrett, who some would argue is the best defensive end in all of the NFL. So yes, he had help being being on the opposite end of Myles Garrett. But at least you're getting a good run defender. You know you're going to get that. You're getting a guy who's got a lot of experience. He's 30 years old. He's been in the league for a while. He can help coach up those young guys. I think out of the list of 3, Justin Houston, Jadeveon Clowney, Yannick Ngakoue, Clowney would be the one I'd get most excited for, not only because of name, because he is a big name, because he was the first overall pick, but I do think there's potential for him to be actually quite, really good for the Bears. And his floor is he's decent, and you probably get him as a 1-year rental, and you move on from him. Justin Houston's the other guy. I'll just tap into him a little bit. Also a very interesting player because of his age. He's 34 years old, but last year for the Baltimore Ravens, Justin Houston had 9.5 sacks. He also has played under Matt Eberflus in 2019 and 2020. He played for the Colts under Eberflus's defense. He had 11 sacks in 2019, 8 sacks in 2020. This is a guy who, even though he's 34 years old, he is still producing at a very high level. He's got 111.5 sacks throughout his entire career, potential Hall of Famer with those numbers. And another guy who I think could add a very good veteran presence, not only to this team, but just to be kind of that coach on the field, a guy who can mentor guys like Dominique Robinson, Trevis Gibson, show them some new pass rush moves, show them some nuances, some tricks that they may not have learned yet. So I think Justin Houston as a 1-year rental, no doubt would only be 1 year because of his age. But if you're able to get him for the right price, you're looking at a guy that, even though he's 34, could get you 8-9 sacks. And if he's able to do that, that's worth every penny, because the Bears desperately need an edge rusher right now. And then you have Yannick Ngakoue, a guy who steadily gets you, 9-10 sacks a year. He's only 28 years old. But the issue with Yannick Ngakoue is he's a pretty putrid run defender. He gets after the quarterback well. He's going to get you the sacks that the Bears desperately need. But the Bears also desperately need run help. And Yannick Ngakoue is not going to give that to them. And I think that the Bears might not feel comfortable having Yannick Ngakoue out there on a snap-by-snap basis, because they're not going to trust him in the run game. And that's why I think Clowney would be the best fit, because at least he's going to give you good run defense, and there's potential upside of being a guy that can get you 8, 9, 10 sacks. Or Justin Houston, because Justin Houston, again, can kind of do it all. Of course, though, his age is a concern. And besides the defensive line, there are a few other pieces on the Bears roster that I hope Ryan Poles addresses before the season begins. All of these are depth pieces, but I do think the Bears' offensive line depth needs to be improved. We still have Lucas Patrick, who can play center or guard. We have Alex Leatherwood, who we'll see if he can turn into maybe a formidable backup offensive lineman, but he can play either guard or tackle. We got Larry Borom, who's our backup right tackle, but other than that, Ja'Tyre Carter, who was a late-round draft pick last year, maybe he can develop into a decent backup, but our offensive line depth is lacking. And I do think that I love the moves Poles made to address the starting offensive line, drafted Darnell Wright, 10th overall. We went out and signed Nate Davis to be our starting right guard. We got Tevin Jenkins at left guard, who proved to be a dominant guard last year. Cody Whitehair moves back to center, who I think this will probably be Cody Whitehair's last year on the Bears, but still, Cody Whitehair is a massive upgrade from Sam Mustipher at center. And then you have year 2 of Braxton Jones, which again, this is a big year for Braxton Jones. If he takes that next step, proves that he is a starting left tackle in this league for the next 10 years, then the Bears are set. The Bears have their cornerstones at left and right tackle. Hopefully that Darnell Wright turns out to be worth the 10th overall pick. But the starting offensive line is set. It's no doubt who the starting 5 will be, but I do think we need more depth there, especially at a position where there's a lot of injuries, a lot of times where you need a guy to come in for a game or two. And you saw the injuries that the Bears had last year on the offensive line. So my guess is Ryan Poles is going to do something similar to what he did last year when he went out and signed Riley Reiff and another offensive lineman right before training camp started. My guess he's going to do something similar to that to at least just add some beef on that offensive line, get us some guys who can produce good depth, who you would at least feel comfortable with having to start a game or two if need be. And besides bolstering up the defensive line, which I talked about, one thing I want to touch on that I didn't mention is besides those free agent additions, you of course have the possibility of the Bears trading for a guy like Chase Young. I would love for the Bears to trade for Chase Young, also a guy who has injury concerns, tore his ACL in his second year, took him longer to rehab than expected. A guy who has all the talent in the world, second overall pick by the Commanders, also friends of Justin Fields, a guy who really brings the juice. I would love Chase Young on the Chicago Bears. The issue is compensation. I would not trade more than a second-round pick for Chase Young. I would no means at all trade a first-round pick for Chase Young. Would I trade a second-round pick? You would have to do a little bit of convincing. Maybe we trade a second-round pick and get a fourth-round pick back. Something like that could work. If it's a third-round pick or less, send it to the Washington Commanders right now. Because Chase Young would give that defense the potential star that it really needs on the defensive line. But we'll see if that happens. Ryan Poles has shown he doesn't love giving away draft capital. So it's a big move to make for a guy that if he does produce, which would be wonderful, you're going to have to end up paying $20 million, the next year because this is his last year of his rookie deal. So trading for Chase Young, it's a huge hot button topic right now. The big question is are the Commanders even willing to trade Chase Young? I'm sure they're probably fielding calls if the offer was right. But if I'm Ryan Poles, I am being very cautious on the trade package that I would give up to acquire a guy like Chase Young. But besides the defensive line and the offensive line, I still would want the Bears to add another safety. And I know I love our safety duo, as I mentioned earlier, in Jaquan Brisker and Eddie Jackson, but the Bears need to have some depth at that safety position. We drafted Elijah Hicks last year, who in his limited playing time didn't really play great, was really just a special teamer. We also drafted a safety out of Stanford this year in the 7th round, another developmental guy. But the Bears need to get another safety to be able to step in if an injury were to happen. I also think the Bears could just re-sign DeAndre Houston Carson, a special team ace, a guy that fans love. Yes, he's 30 years old, but he's been with the organization for, I believe, his whole career. And it's just shown time in and time out that he is a very, very valuable backup safety. Even a guy who can bring in if you want to run a 3-safety look. And I think, re-signing DHC would fill that need for me for the Bears to go out and sign some more safety depth. So that's a complete breakdown of the Bears roster, where I think their strengths are, where I think their weaknesses are. I hope you guys stay tuned for the whole thing. As you can see, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I cannot freaking wait for football season to start. I'm a nut about it. I love the Chicago Bears to death. I've been a diehard since birth. And I just am so excited for this season, as all Bears fans are. There's so much hope and optimism around this team. And I really think that this team can be a playoff team this year. We're going to see. If you had to make my prediction right now for the Bears, it would probably be 10-7. Maybe they can squeak out 11-6. But I really think that this team is going to compete for the NFC North this year. And if they don't win the North, I think that they can most certainly be a wild card team this year. But it's all barring Justin Fields and him taking that next step. The keys to the city are on the right arm of a 24-year-old. No pressure, Justin Fields. But if you turn into a superstar, you will be the biggest sports player in Chicago history since Michael Jordan. It's as simple as that. If Justin Fields is a superstar, like I believe he truly can be, you will be the biggest name in sports in Chicago since Michael Jordan. And if you bring us a Super Bowl, the city's going to burn to the ground if the Bears win a Super Bowl. That's how much the city bleeds blue and orange, and how much we are craving for a good Bears team. But I love the moves Ryan Poles has made. I love the way he's rebuilding this team. He stripped it down. We're now in that year one of really building this team back up. But I've told my friends, I've told coworkers that the whole time this has been a 3-year rebuild. Year one is stripping it down. Check. That was last year. Ended up being the worst team in the league record-wise. Ended up getting the number one overall pick, trading it for a haul. Year two, this is when you compete for the playoffs. Maybe you hit lightning in a bottle. Maybe you're kind of like the Cincinnati Bengals. You come out of nowhere. You make a deep playoff run. Maybe Justin Fields turns into, he's an MVP candidate this year. Everything clicks. And this team is, in the divisional NFC Championship. Who knows? But you at least want to be in the playoffs this year. And then the year after that is when you make your Super Bowl run. And I really believe that. I think that is the blueprint that Ryan Poles convinced the McCaskies of when he got accepted for the position. And I think that's the plan that he has in his head. It's a 3-year rebuild. And if you're able to do it correctly and they're able to hit on these players, they're going to have sustained success for the next 10, 12 years as long as Justin Fields is under center. If Justin Fields is a superstar, the Bears will be in the playoffs and in Super Bowl contention for the next 10 to 12 years. I truly believe that. We'll see what happens. But as you can see from the smile on my face, I cannot wait. I'm so excited. It finally feels like we may have found the guy, which we haven't had in Chicago ever. We have never had the quarterback. And like I said, the keys to the city reside on the right arm of 24-year-old Justin Fields.